We wanted to, because the board over the last 6 months or so has been talking about, well, what direction should we be trying to move the organization in? So we thought it would be useful to share with you what the board sees as having always been the goals and objectives of the organization. So the first goal from the very beginning, from 8 years ago, our first goal was, because the people who signed up originally were people who were already doing some mediation, and who, like many of us, feel like they would like to do more mediation, and they would like to do more mediation in a professional capacity where people might eventually pay them for the services that they're rendering, since we think they're of value. So our first goal and our highest priority is to advance the members as mediators, as professionals in Rhode Island. And the website is one way we do that, because to the extent that you're listed on the website as a mediator, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit, about what those listings look like, that's a way that you are present, to the public, that they get to, if they're looking for mediators. Rhode Island Mediators Association does come up a lot on website searches, and if somebody's looking for a mediator, there is a directory. They can go to the directory. So we think that's a value to the members that helps them move forward to do mediation, which those of us who've been drawn to it just find the process rewarding for ourselves and for the parties in conflict with whom we work. So we want to do it, but many of the members want to be paid to do it. And so we have seen that as our first priority. Our first goal is to advance the status and situation of mediators as professionals in Rhode Island. We also saw that, because at the time, 8 years ago, and to a large extent even today, although I think it's a little bit better, the opinion leaders in Rhode Island might not have always had on the tip of their tongue, or on the front of their mind, that mediation might be the preferred mechanism for conflict resolution, that there wasn't enough awareness about mediation. And so, we felt as a board, and still feel as a board, that we ought to be trying to contribute to the efforts that we and other organizations, and Tanya's here for another mediation organization, CMCRI, are doing to try to advance mediation, as a conflict resolution mechanism in this state. And some of the events that we do, on which we have sometimes lost money, are about trying to invite some other people to come who might be opinion leaders or might be in a position to refer things to mediation. And so if we invite judges, trying to educate them about the value of mediation that may eventually lead to the adoption of some sort of mandatory mediation regime in Rhode Island, which we don't have yet, that's part of our educational role about trying to advance mediation as a profession. The website, people who are looking for mediation learn about it. We're trying to be collaborative. The closest organization we have to work with is CMCRI. Over the years, we've tried to work with them. We've been meeting with Tanya and Aaron, the executive director and program director at CMCRI, to try to figure out how we can reinforce each other and collaborate, recognizing that we may have slightly different missions. Our first mission is to advance the membership as professionals who are trying to do this as part of their professional work and to be paid for it. And CMCRI has a commitment to mediation as a community value, and they do a lot of either no or low cost work, with volunteers that they train or that they enlist. Taryn's an example of, they didn't do her training, but she's got a lot of training from a master's degree, so they enlist volunteers. They didn't do my training, but I'm a volunteer there. And they have a slightly different mission, but we thought we should be multiplying that effort to advance mediation in our community in the state of Rhode Island. And if there are other organizations that we could work with, that would be great too. So we're trying to do that. And then, once you've made your mind up that this is something that you want to do, we thought the organization should try to help you do a better job of it. Should try to create opportunities for you to either connect with other mediators, to talk with them about what they're doing, to learn from them about how they're going about doing what they're doing, how they're doing it to make money, or how they're doing it just to get better. So networking. We also felt like mediation's not yet in this state a regulated profession. There are very minimal state requirements for how you get into the mediation world. There is a statute about confidentiality that refers to, if you want to promise the parties confidentiality and protect yourself against being subpoenaed to come in and testify in a case about what you did as a mediator, you have to have 30 hours of training. That's pretty minimal. There's not yet a regulated profession. So the recent thinking of the board is, well, if we could think about pathways to career development and to enhancing your status and reputation and recognition through a graded, gradations of maybe you join as a member because you think you might be interested in mediation, you're not sure. Then if you want to get listed as a mediation practitioner, there ought to be some things that ought to be part of what you're holding out to get on, to get the status of mediation practitioner. And then maybe, and we've had this for a while, maybe people like Christine, who's been doing it for 20 years, or me, who's been doing it for 30 years, maybe, or Jeremy, who's been doing it for 20, or Bryna, who's been doing it, maybe people who've been doing this actively, professionally, over time, would get elevated to the status of advanced mediator. And they would, be able to brand themselves that way, but also make a commitment to the organization to help newer people develop, take on a mentoring responsibility. So we weren't as formal about that until our thinking recently about putting together at least a draft of proposals to share with the membership about how might that work. And that is part of what we want to share for you. But in addition to that, those pathways, which I'm going to ask you to look at in a minute, we have been from the very beginning offering workshops, 2-hour workshops, 4 to 6 times a year on discrete topics that either to learn about a particular field or to work on a technique or to bring in a speaker who might help us learn more about something. A lot of them have been connected to family law, family mediation practice, because a lot of the members do that kind of work as part of what they do. But we're also, trying to do some other things. We've done workshops on, working with multiple parties as the party. So you've got team groups. The parties are 5 or 6 people on each side, which is different than working with 2 people who are in conflict. And that's technique-wise could be useful in lots of areas, not likely to be family so much, not likely to be family and divorce. But we've done things on, child support and, and on elder mediation. We did, we had brought some people in from Boston about elder mediation. So we've been trying to offer regular 2-hour workshops, which Holly Hitchcock, who is actually one of our members because she does family mediating, and who is the MCLE person for lawyers in Rhode Island, she's willing to certify them as you get CLE for them because she feels they're about skills that lawyers can use. Mediation is an area that lawyers deal in, so that people can get continuing ed credits. We have some ambitions about providing, bigger trainings, advanced trainings, 24-hour trainings in particular contexts. So, the thought is people who get basic training, which turns out we think that's a requirement for anybody who wants to get listed as a mediation practitioner, is that they have completed sort of the foundational basic mediation skills training. But we thought we would, once people are in the organization, design and try to offer something bigger than that. I regularly teach at the law school, and I know Emily has taken it, a 40-hour family and divorce mediation training course that law students, but lawyers and therapists have taken. And maybe the organization might scale that down on the assumption that if you've already taken 40 hours somewhere else, then we should be thinking about how do we help you hold yourself out as having particular specific qualification, whether that's in mediating financial matters, mediating elder and probate matters, because I do that, and I know Jeremy does that kind of work. So that's part of the plan. So the documents, the rest of beyond the agenda and the financial report, there's three things here that kind of reflect at least the tentative thinking of the board about what the structure of the organization could move to. So one of them is a chart, Rhode Island Mediators Association membership levels. So thinking about how people would belong to the organization, we have always had people who don't want to be mediators, like financial planners and like accountants, who want to join the organization because they see as an opportunity to market their practices, which are not mediation. So we've always had a category of affiliated professionals who pay and who can come to our trainings at the discounted rate. They pay the $20, not the $40 for the trainings, and who get listed but not as mediators. They're in a catch-all listing of affiliated professionals, so it might be an accountant, it might be a number of them are financial planners. I don't know.
Lawyer.
Some lawyers who don't want to mediate but want to be listed.
Therapists, psychologists.
Yeah, and psychologists. So we've always had that. We didn't always have an advanced mediator category, but I think that's about 2 or 3 years that we created that category.
Longer than that.
Longer than that? Okay.
Time flies.
Okay, so for a number of years, in response to the expressed concerns of people who've been doing this for 15 or 20 years is, why am I listed the same way as somebody who just got training last month? So we did create a category of advanced mediator, and recognizing at the time that some people had been doing this for a long time, with great skill and with some success, that if you look at the pathways to advanced mediator, there are alternative pathways. It was kind of like, maybe if you've got 10 years of experience, and you have liability insurance, which we think, and you commit to adhering to ethical rules that are jointly enacted by the ABA, the AAA, there's a third group in there. ACR. So we got these professional standards. We think you ought to commit to the professional. You ought to know what they are and commit to those. Have liability insurance, have a lot of experience, or some combination of maybe less experience but advanced training. So we thought there ought to be alternative pathways to getting listed as an advanced mediator. And then the other category before that was just member. And we think there ought to be members, people who aren't yet in the game, who want to join the organization because they want to learn about mediation or they believe in mediation and they're trying to promote it. And then people who want to do this professionally who get listed as mediation practitioners. And so this is the current thinking about what the hierarchy should look like. Anybody who's interested in mediation can join as a member. They don't get listed on the website if they're just a member. But if you are doing something, working in mediation, and you've had training, and you commit to the principles of the organization about ethical responsibility and insurance, then you can get listed as a mediation practitioner and then eventually move up to being listed after 3 years, after a number of years of working with a certain amount of hours of mediation in a given year, and you tell us, we have an application, you tell us, I meet all these criteria, I'd like to be moved up. And I think Andy has recently been moved up, or are we about to be moved up or something like that. He's applied, so the thought is there ought to be a pathway, and that ought to give you some recognition that on the website you're listed that way, and newer people might be told they can approach you about helping them out and helping them figure out where their career path is. I mentor people all the time. I work with newer mediators all the time, and offer them the opportunity to sit in on things that I'm doing when I get permission from the parties to do that. And some of the mediations that I do, like Erica is one of our board members and relatively newer mediator, and she's worked with me now on very extended labor relations contract impasse mediations, because she wanted to learn and was willing to come to those, even though she wasn't going to get paid, for her participation, but it was an opportunity to learn. So that's the thinking that we have. The pathways may not be perfect as we've set them up, and tonight I realized that we're saying for mediation practitioners 40 hours basic training, which we think is the national norm. We think if somebody wants to enter this field, that's what other states who do have regulated professions say is the bare minimum to even say, that may not be sufficient, but certainly necessary to have a good basic mediation skills training program. We think 40 hours is the norm. CMCRI hasn't been doing 40 hours until recently, but they have upped it now to 40 hours. So, it is available in this community. It's available. I know other people have. Jay said he went up to Boston, right, to MWI. They offer a 40-hour training program. It's pretty normative. I, at the law school, teach basic mediation skills, 40-hour program. So we're looking at that. I do think I personally think the anomaly on the pathway to mediation practitioner is that we say, not only do you have that entry training, but you have to have an additional 24 hours. And my personal thought is that ought to move up to the advanced, or at least one of the advanced pathways ought to be basic training, some experience, advanced training, something like that. And we're open to, that's why we're having the meeting, is to say, what do you think of this model? Do you think this model makes sense? It also involves perhaps a small increase in dues, which we might have done anyhow, because I think we were at 140 for advanced, and now it's 150.
Well, it involves a reduction for people who don't meet the practitioner level.
Oh, because it was 70 before?
Because it was 70 before.
It was 70. Now we're going to reduce that to 50, but for somebody who wasn't in advance, they were paying 70, and now we're saying you're going to go up to 100. And the advanced, who were 120.
140.
Well, we were 120, and then it went to 140, and now we're saying 150. So, we're trying to figure out what is a reasonable charge for it to be reasonable value to the members to be able to come to trainings and to be listed on the website and to be able to network with other people who are working in the field in the state. We don't think these charges, but maybe we're wrong, and maybe you'll tell us you think these are crazy charges, and they're not a lot more than we've been charging. I don't know that we necessarily are looking to raise revenue to accomplish more. Sometimes some members have said to us, well, why aren't you advertising mediation publicly? And that's a budget that we don't have that in this budget to think about TV spots to promote mediation, or
even those little newspaper clips.
Yeah, or even, that's not, that's not in the scope of the organization. Without any full-time, without any paid employees, with just volunteers on the board, and we're also looking, hopefully, to maybe have some other members want to take on more in advancing the organization. I'm not a kid, I'm 71 years old, and Jeremy's not a kid, right? So maybe some younger, newer members with energy might also want to take on more, and certainly in terms of engagement of members, we've always been looking for input about, are there topics that you would like us to try to organize workshops about? You know, if we were to do an ambitious 20 or 24-hour training, where do you think a good field to do that in is? Because we think training in a context might be useful for somebody to be able to say, I took basic skills, basic mediation skills training, and I've also taken something in elder and probate mediation, advanced training that's more than a workshop, more than a 2-hour workshop. I don't think that's substantial enough for anybody to get recognition value for that. But being able to say, I completed and got a certificate of completion of a 24-hour advanced training might be useful for you, for us to offer. That's the vision that we have at the moment, that we're looking to get a conversation going about. What do you think about all of that? Because we haven't rolled this out. This is the idea to test market it, to a select, focus group selected by you because you came. So you're the selection process. You came to our focus group here to see what do you think about all that. So that was the purpose of the meeting, is to sort of open it up for discussion to see how do you react to this whole structure that the board's been thinking about. Anybody want to share their thoughts? Sure.
Well, I have sort of some experience with the idea. I've got a license as a CPA here, and I had a license in other states when I lived there. I still carried one additional out-of-state license. And I'm also in a couple of other organizations, one of which has scaled designations. The American Society of Appraisers, because I do business in intangible assets. So I've got a little experience with this. As most of you probably know, you have to work for 2 years under another CPA before you can even apply to get your license. I mean, in addition to passing the examination and having a degree and so on. And that's to protect the public. And it may not be enough experience, really, when you think of it. But, so that concept makes sense, to protect the public. In the other organization, the ASA, you need 3 years of experience and to have passed all the examinations, have your reports approved by an anonymous board, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You need 3 years experience to be an accredited member, and then 5 years experience, including those 3, to be considered an accredited senior member. And that's in part to let the public know how much experience you have. A part of that may be to recognize advanced levels, but actually you can be a fellow of the American Society of Appraisers if you serve the organization with distinction. And usually you've got 25 or 30 years. You're a minor icon in the sky of that field. So I sort of, this makes some sense, but when I look through it, I don't get the feeling that I have from the other organizations where it's really spelled out very clearly. Like in an ASA, an accredited member and an accredited senior member have exactly the same level of training. The only difference between them is the experience. It's just, just the experience. And of course, I told you about the CPA. So, what I would hope to see is basically a path where when a person becomes a mediator, they have all the training that others have, but then you're recognizing additional experience, because that's really what teaches us whatever we do, whatever profession we do, right? Just being out in the field, working with clients, with a senior member of your profession.
So if I understand your comment, Jay, it's that the pathways ought to be more concrete and that it's a little bit hazy.
Yeah, and I noticed the term current practice in a professional field. Well, what is that?
Right.
What constitutes a professional field? And pathway, on the first page of the advanced mediator designation, is 3 to 5 year practice of mediation. What does that mean? 3 years or 5?
So more concrete.
A little bit more spelled out so that the person moving up the ladder knows exactly what to do, what they have to do to get there. And the public would know what they're, who they're hiring, and what they have accomplished.
So what would you, since it says 3 to 5 years, what would you suggest? Would it be 3 years? Would it be 4 years? Would it be 5 years?
I don't know, because that would be for people that pay more
What
than
your
me.
thoughts would be.
Right, so part
Well,
of the...
one of the problems is that in all the professions, I mean, everything you said is true, like, of every profession every established profession that I know. Engineers have to work under an engineer for 4 years before they get a license. But when you think of the licensing as separate from the professional associations, they all have associate memberships and they all have levels of membership that are separate from the actual licensing, even in licensed professions.
You're right, in that ASA organization I mentioned is, you're a candidate until you become accredited.
Until you become, okay. So that's all the way the world works, and it all works. But one of the problems that we see with using those models, bringing those models directly when you're talking about mediation, is there is no licensing definition, because there is no licensing. There is no body of knowledge or test that you pass this and you can get a license. We're also part of this. Part of this is that whole working as a trainee. The engineers call it engineering training. Every profession, not all professions, but most of the professions that you're talking about have those levels. Social workers, you have to work under a social work. 10,000 hours under a licensed social worker. They all have that, but what they also have is that you can sort of make a living while you're doing that, because they're talking about, at least up until the economy of the last couple of years, they're all talking about job situations, employment situations, like you said with accountants. They're working in an accounting firm. They may be paid a lot less, and they can't do some of the things that the accountants can do, and engineers can't stamp plans, but they're making a living. They're engaged full time in that professional practice. That doesn't exist with mediators.
Right. So one of the things that in some of those other professions that have more members and more history is that there are enforcement mechanisms about that. And we're a very small organization. To a large extent, if somebody applies to advanced mediator, we sort of look at what the application says, but we're not going out and being the mediation police to figure out the so and I do understand Jay's point, which is years of experience in the field is much more concrete to say, do you have 3 years of experience? Do you have 4 years of experience? Than saying some of the other pathway things that we have in there. One of the things that we talked about was, well, years of experience, but how many mediations did you do during that year, and how many hours did you actually work with parties? Because you can say, I'm a mediator, but if you get one case a year, does that count as a year of experience? Whereas somebody else who is maybe volunteering to gain the experience, because maybe that's the way you gain your experience, but somebody who goes to court in the court annex CMCRI program, they may wind up doing 40 or 50 mediations a year. I absolutely appreciate it's a lot easier to understand what's expected of you if it's check these boxes off and you've made the grade, but we're trying to figure this out. We're in an unregulated, I see you, Christina, we're in an unregulated profession for the moment, and I don't think the state yet has an interest in developing a regulatory scheme for mediators. That might cost money. The state doesn't have any money to do that with.
I wouldn't even trust them to do it. That's
okay.
A different story.
Different story. So, does this organization have the capability to regulate media? I don't think so. I think what we're trying to do is to help the people who want to work in this area to figure out how they might be able to do that successfully. Christine had her hand up before you, Jeremy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted 2 points. One is that I think that the pathways are fine. Looks okay to me. I would, apropos with what Jay was saying and what you were just saying, I would just really emphasize, and what Frank was saying about this is not a licensing body. Put it, in bold letters. That
Right.
This is a peer review. Make it clear to the public that this advanced mediation designation is based on a peer review model. Nothing more, nothing less, by a professional association. And the second comment that I just wanted to make is that I'm not sure about on the membership levels that I agree that 5 hours of my mediation training has to be through this organization. I think that's a bit high.
Okay.
I would say 3 or 2, but not 5.
Okay.
So that was it.
I mean, I thought, and I'll tell you what I thought about that was, and I understand your comment, and I'm writing it down. It was, if you're a member of the organization, we'd like you to come to the things that we do together so that you can be part of a community of network mediators. And if well, no, it isn't about money, because $20 to come to a workshop is not
No,
about.
it's a money issue for me,
Okay.
and it's a scheduling issue, because a lot
Well,
of
scheduling is an issue.
programs are in Providence at 5:30, and I'm not gonna fight this chapter.
Right. Right.
So,
So-
and also, I look at my choices of what you're presenting, and I say, well, I don't need that. I know that. I need to go to California, or I need to go somewhere else. So I would lower that number,
Mhm.
and that's my only other comment. But thank you, board members, for doing all this work.